go ahead and get going. Chris, are you ready to go? Okay. Yeah. And our DAG has showed up, and well, actually I've seen him out in the audience, so he's been here a while. But he missed all the action yesterday, so anyway, I imagine it's going to be pretty wet today. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Thanks for letting me present before the commission what I consider a pretty exciting project. I guess just for the microphone, I'll sit down to present, which is a little different. The title slide here, I just wanted to highlight this photograph where you can see this marked male on the left and a banded female on the right. The male, those tarsal bands I was mentioning the other day, that yellow band on the left there, that's been the key to our project for collecting a lot of extra data. First off, the proposal I have ahead of you guys is to actually perform an experiment examining the effects of harvest rates and how populations respond to this. Currently, waterfowl regulations are conducted through a series of surveys, and based on that annual data, by definition, they can change annually. But just as a side note, currently we're in the 17th year of liberal regulations, which means we've been shooting ducks at the highest rates ever, and yet this year was the highest recorded counts of ducks ever recorded since the surveys began. So that kind of an interesting enigma there. Some issues with current waterfowl management is the role of harvest dynamics in specifically ducks remains controversial. It's been quite some time. We understand the harvest implications on geese because they're an easier species to study. For some species, we have species-specific models, let alone the regulations are complex, but the regulatory process is extremely complex. And such things as continental mallards, lesser scaup, and northern pintails actually have models that don't explore a compensatory nature in harvest. And a lot of us see that as a problem in the basis for this controversy. And these last two species, scaup and pintails, are really hot topics now because people see them in their localized regions as extremely abundant with some of the most restrictive regulations in place. We never, in the Pacific Flyway, pintails are our hot one. But in the mid-continent, scaup are, where I grew up. So typically we've managed harvest. There's a simplified graph here. On the bottom, as population size moves to the right, increases, we typically increase our harvest on the x-axis. So when there's more ducks, have at them. When there's less ducks, don't have them, don't shoot them as much. But when you actually explore some of the data, you get a completely backwards answer. And that is, the higher you shoot them, the higher survival rate you have. And if you back down, the higher you shoot them, the lower survival they have. The less you shoot them, the higher survival you have. And so, that is the basis of the controversy. It's like, what's happening? How does this affect it? This has been the key question remaining in waterfowl management for a long time. This problem was identified in the 70s. And actually, a continent-wide experiment was started in the mid-80s. Everyone was on board. And basically what they were going to do was hold harvest regulations constant over a suite of years. It was proposed to be 10 years. And see what happens, given the prairies where most of the ducks are produced vary annually. But everyone backed out because one of the largest droughts recorded happened in the mid-80s, and the experiment was dropped, and no one's readdressed it. And this schematic's the same as what I showed before, but the green oval up on top is basically what they proposed in their experiment. So they're going to hold harvest at a relatively constant rate while population size changed. And what I'm proposing is very similar, but it's the opposite. We're going to hold the other one constant. Well, we're going to let harvest vary while the population size stays relatively constant. And that's kind of nice here because the core wood duck habitat in the Fallon area happens to be in the more upstream stretches of the water delivery systems. So I've been here 10 years now next week, and you typically see those upstream water delivery features filled every year. You know, granted, they're a little bit fuller, but I have yet to see them dry. So, and then the red dots here, I just kind of placed them there to show where our harvest rates have been during the course of the study so far, and why I'm asking for a reduction in harvest so that we can get some more of those red dots closer to zero. Okay. What does this mean to waterfowl managers? Elmer hit this perfectly yesterday. Regulations may change frequently, confuses hunters, therefore they lose interest. They don't buy licenses, but also they don't maintain habitat. A prime example is of the wetlands in the Central Valley in California, one of the most important wetland complexes in the continent in waterfowl concentrations. It's been shown that close to 70% of the wetland habitats in the winter is maintained by duck clubs. Okay, so if you lose the interest, they're not going to maintain their duck clubs. And therefore, the waterfowl resource suffers. And this is the important component for resource managers. This isn't a good story. As I was going back about how models contain either an additive or compensatory component, typically it's additive. That's, you're managing on this black line, which is basically for every animal you harvest, reduces the population by 1. Where alternatively, compensatory is at low harvest rates on the left where it stays flat. At a suite of harvest, you're not impacting survival rate at all. Now you can increase harvest up to a point where it does become additive, but there is this flat component here which under correct harvest management schemes should not affect the population. And during graduate school I got to work on a couple different projects. This is with Lesser Scout, and sure enough, when you draw these lines through the dots, they tend to be more of the shoulder shape rather than a straight line shape. And also looking at goose I worked on during grad school, same thing exists, but yet we're not managing them in this fashion. We're managing them with that completely negative linear line. This brings in the wood duck project I've been working on. Started in 2003, as you're all aware. We've banded over 3,400 wood ducks. I apologize, I tried to get the commission out last night and this morning, and we caught about 80 ducks between last night and this morning. So next time I'll work harder on you guys and try to get you to work. Otherwise, come out anytime you'd like. So yeah, we've banded over 3,400 individuals, and we've also installed about 450 boxes at this point. And currently, we web tag a little metal staple in the duckling's foot on the day they're hatched. And typically, we do about 98% of the ducklings that are hatched. And when we're catching birds, especially this time of year when they're fledged before hunting season comes up, it's about 1 out of 10 of the ducklings that we're catching here came out of our boxes. So the project itself has actually increased the population. Now this is just a map of the Fallon area. The wood ducks are typically in the Carson River, which is the blue line. The red and yellow lines you see there are areas where we've installed boxes. Typically, I think we actually ran this through GIS a little bit ago, and approximately 70% of the river from the diversion dam to Wolf Dam has a box every 50 yards. So we're kind of running out of spots, but we'll still take them from the Boy Scouts when they build them. The green dots are where we have rocket net shots. And these are the bands we're using. Explained them good. We actually, yesterday, started putting on our 4th color now, which is kind of fun. And in total, this is just a summary of our banding effort and recite effort and recapture effort. Going down is month, going across in the green bars is years. And it was in 2008 when we started using those coded bands. So there's actually a 3rd column that gets inserted there for recites. And going in that orange box down below, we've done 3,700, we banded 3,756 individuals. This is in the middle of June. We've recaptured 2,100 of those unique individuals, and our recite data is around 1,300. So just by adding that band, we're increasing our re-encounter rate by about 30%, which is great for us. This is a simple map just showing where birds that were shot and reported by hunters were reported as coming from. There is one dot missing from here that came this last winter from northeast Texas, which is kind of surprising. The colors are indicative of how many were recovered in a 10-minute block by latitude, longitude, so it's kind of just a summary. And you can see the Fallon area here has the really bright colors. I provided the pie chart up on the top left just to show where these, you count up these dots, where they're coming from. 83% of the recoveries are coming from Nevada, and 99% of those are coming from Churchill County. In Nevada, we have that one dot in the middle. I should have deleted that. That's actually from someone that banded 24 wood ducks in the 60s. But outside of Churchill County, we've only had 2 recoveries, one up by Lovelock, one down by Schurz. Otherwise, all of the recoveries in Nevada are in Churchill County only. I put that. Okay, can you guys back me up 2 slides? Sorry about that. And yesterday, backwards. One more. There you go. This one's for Hal Sherm here. I put this back in where I was mentioning the problems with raccoons, and our data set's pretty good. This analysis is a couple of years old now. It takes a lot of work to update these estimates, so I'm going to leave this to the next graduate student. But focus in on February, March, April, and you can see the females are the filled-in symbols, young females are the circles, adult females are the squares. Based on age, they start nesting at different times. The adults will start breeding about a month before the juveniles. And the adults start to breed in March, and you can see that survival rate for adult females, that black square, drops, while that young female circle stays up. And then what happens is those birds hatch out, and in April, most of the juveniles are in the box. And you can see those flip-flop, which is pretty neat. And the story behind that is basically that's when they're vulnerable to raccoons pulling them out of natural cavity nests. This is from the whole data set, not just the birds pulled out of our nest boxes. So this is pretty cool here, pretty good story. The males stay higher. And then, just with our data from the nest boxes showing different ages in the boxes, the story is quite collaborated. Which shows that's, for females, that's the most dangerous time of the year is when they're in their nest box, which I hope addresses some of your questions you had yesterday. We have 2 hypotheses with this experiment we're proposing. One is that adult survival or annual survival won't change with how much you vary harvest, and then we do have an alternative hypothesis. Second is we actually throw in an idea that individual quality might allow for compensation. And this is a really new idea. Currently, no waterfowl population is managed on a body condition index, although it has been proposed for northern pintails. I was at a meeting recently where this is now on the plate. And I want to explain what this individual quality is. So when we capture a wood duck, some birds we've caught 40 times, we run them through this whole gamut. They get measured for a whole bunch of different skeletal measures, and in the middle, you can see we shove them in a 2-liter pop bottle and put them on a scale. And the reason we do this is the example I give everybody. If you have 2 200-pound people, one's 5 foot tall, one's 6 foot tall, you control for their body size, and that would suggest that a 5 foot tall, 200-pound individual is fatter than a 6 foot, 200-pound person. And when you're a wild animal, body condition is really important. Typically, the heavier individuals are better quality. And this is an example from my dissertation work. Don't get too confused. This will be really simple. Across the bottom is just a series of years, and we actually measured goslings at 30 days of age. And each line is just a different spot we did this at. So you can see across this enormous data set, there's a lot of variation. You see some years, wow, the goslings are really big. Other years, the goslings are really small. As a side note, the dots above 2,000 to the left of that gap was the highest number of brant ever recorded in our colony. So numerically, we're like, wow, the population's doing great. You look at this, and it's like, these goslings are small. Couple that with other studies we've done, that red line across there, if If individuals are above that, they will breed in their lifetime. If they're below that, we've got nearly a 0 probability of ever detecting them breeding. So even though in that example I showed you for the year 2000, we produced a zillion goslings, but they're all of extremely low quality, and they never were recruited into the population. Okay, so this is where the individual quality comes in. So this is a neat slide I like showing people, asking what you see here. This is from Fallon area here, just downstream of the Schuckler Bridge. And just highlights how high of a proportion of the population is marked. And as I mentioned earlier, we weigh and measure all these individuals. So we've got data on a ton of these guys. We're seeing them all over frequently. We're recapturing them frequently so we can actually weigh them. And if you build a histogram, you get a normal distribution curve. Okay, you got weights across the bottom, and then basically going up is just how many birds we have. And then the red line is just the average. You know, average weight, which you can typically relate to the probability they're going to survive from one year to the next. And then there's several studies that show harvest typically shoots the lowest quality individuals in the population. They're more vulnerable to harvest. They do dumb things, they're naive, they're spending more time feeding than watching out, and they tend to decoy easier. So imagine in a hunting season you have a removal, that shotgun blast, and you remove individuals, and it changes your distribution curve. And then at the same time, it actually makes the rest of the birds survive at a higher rate. That's a density-dependent effect. And this is where the whole concept of quality comes into. So what are we proposing to do to wood ducks? Already we do a lot, and the new stuff is we're proposing to have an experiment where we force harvest rates to vary. And going back to this slide again, those red dots and that purple oval there show what we've collected so far. As we're all aware, it's a 9-year study. But we're missing some of those really low harvest rates, those harvest rates that are as close to 0 as possible. The last couple of years are those 2 highest dots, and that's basically an artifact that the word's gotten out that we've been banning a lot of birds. And there's an interesting phenomenon going out that, you know, we don't have horns on our ducks and stuff for trophy status, but boy, you put a piece of metal on their leg, and their trophy status goes through the roof. And we've got lots of reports of people coming from across the country to come here because, you know, with 80% of the population being marked, you shoot one, you got a pretty good odd. Plus our birds come with 2 bands, so it's even a bigger incentive. So we're basically asking the commission to give us an opportunity to have harvest rates as close to 0 as possible. And what I'm asking for is people to basically leave them alone for a couple of years. Okay. When I ban birds, I've got my own bird banning permit now. It comes with the names of the people that shoot them. So this is actually a table that's a little confusing, but basically I just tallied up how many birds each person shoots. Typically, people don't encounter bans at very high rates. You know, if you have 2 or 3 bans on your lanyard, that probably took you 10 years. This isn't the situation here. For us, we've had about 450 bans shot and reported in Churchill County alone by about 150 different hunters over the course of the 9 years project. Of those 450 bans shot and reported, half of them are shot by 11 individuals. So this is where I'm trying to just provide some background showing this isn't going to impact a lot of people. You know, there's a few people that get a wood duck here and there, but mostly, you know, a lot of this harvest is driven by 11 people. And I will speak up, all 11 of these people are very supportive of the project. They either help us with rocket net shots, help check boxes, or they actually weigh and measure every single bird that they shoot during the hunting season, and they're fully supportive. So in summary, this question of how populations respond to harvest remains unanswered. This could help guide future regulation setting processes that may result in harvest packages that don't vary from year to year, which I think would be of interest to state wildlife agencies so that you can recruit and retain more hunters. And also people are asking how this could reach, beyond just wood ducks here. And, this could influence duck regulations across the country. Pintails are an extremely hot topic in the Pacific Flyway. This would instantly open the door to questions about how we manage pintails. And as I mentioned, there are other situations where kill is involved. And energy development currently with golden eagles is huge. And it's basically asking, is every dead bird equal? And with this individual quality hypothesis, we'd say no. It could be, human harvest-induced kill is compensated for. And support so far, as I mentioned, those 11 hunters. I've held 2 informal dinners here in Fallon where we invited everybody that's reported abandoned wood duck, all landowners, biologists, law enforcement. The first year we had just about 30 people. This last year we had just about 50. In both cases I give them a questionnaire so they can enter the door prize drawing that Sportsman's Warehouse provides us. And with that survey we've had 100% support for the harvest experiment, calling for 1 bird daily bag. Nevada Waterfowl Association supported. I was supposed to go to the Washoe Cab, but they changed their meeting up for a week while I was on vacation. I did go to the Churchill Cab. Pacific Flyway Study Committee is in support. And lastly, Nevada Department of Wildlife. And these are the people who've been funding us. And I'm done. Any questions?
I have a question. So, for us non-biologists, the message here is, and what you're trying to show by having a low harvest rate is to compare it to the population modeling, what your estimate of population is, and to show that when it's a high harvest or whether it's a low harvest, it's not affecting the population. Is that the premise?
Exactly. So you can imagine things that influence population dynamics, like the stuff Russell was getting into, survival rate, probability of breeding, how successful their nests are, how many eggs they lay, proportion of eggs that survive to recruitment. We can measure almost all of those with this project. That's what I was trying to highlight the other day. We've got a really unique situation with a duck population. We can estimate almost all these parameters. And I was looking for a question that would be of interest, and I'm hoping this one hits out of the park.
And in addition, what we talked about yesterday is that also allows for the elimination of the identification of the different species. In other words, we have harvest. We basically just set a harvest level, and we stick with it. And it doesn't involve species identification. Therefore, we have more involvement in, from the duck hunters, and that's better for the resource overall.
Right. And I will be honest a little bit there. It would be a little bit of a stretch to go into the species-specific regs, but it could help with that. But I just want to make sure you understand this is more of just annual variation in harvest packages rather than species-specific. But it could lead to something such as you're suggesting of a splash limit, where there's a lower daily bag, but there aren't any species restrictions. But I just wanted to make that clear for you.
Mr. Chairman, I serve on a couple national committees, and there's been a lot of conversation about a splash limit, where 5 splashes, you don't have to pay attention to whether you killed a hen mallard or not, because people, they're worried about violating the law. But what the service is so conservative that they consider everything additive mortality, like pumping oil out of the ground. There's just so much, and every gallon that you pump out, it's gone, never to be replaced. And the work that Chris is doing and the others in the Pacific Flyway, we're trying to move towards something. Why do we only have 1 or 2 pintail? Well, this kind of work can be applicable to looking at that population and saying, you know what, we're at all-time high, and yet we don't have a structure at this point from a regulatory perspective to respond to when the hay's growing. And by the time we up the limit to 4 pintail, then we're going to see these normal cycles, and we're always chasing what the biology is. So why we support this, and Chris needs to be commended. A lot of this stuff is out of his own time, out of his own pocket, because he's so passionate of a duck hunter and a duck biologist. I wish he was working for us instead of the feds, but we'll work on that. But anyway, we do support this 100%. I told him when he came to me, he goes, well, what do you think of this idea? And I said, well, it goes nowhere unless you can get the duck hunters on board. And I mean, he put on the dinner himself, brought everybody together and convinced us that the duck hunters are behind this. So.
Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Rainey.
Maybe to help expedite, what I see, we got two options. We can either debate it for 20 minutes and then approve it as presented by the department, or we can, second comes back to the commission when we get to 22. I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this made by the department.
Okay, this was an informational item,
Yeah,
a non-public comment, so if you're done, then, and if there's no more questions, then we can move on to the next agenda item. Okay.
Thanks for your time and support over the years.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move right on to the next agenda item. Commission Regulation 1111, Migratory Waterfowl, Wildlife Staff Specialist, Russell Woolstenhulme action. Commission may adopt following regulations for the management of migratory waterfowl. These recommendations comply with the proposed regulation framework for 2011-12 late hunting season on certain migratory game birds established by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission. Russell Woolstenhulme, Department of Wildlife. I just kind of want to point out some of the highlighted changes of this year's recommendations. The first one is for the first time ever, the federal framework allows us to split the youth hunt. In the past, it's had to be, it can be up to 2 days, and if you had 2 days, they had to be consecutive. And they now allow us to split those out, so the department has proposed for each of the zones 1 day before the season and 1 day after the season for the youth. Another big change is in November, the commission voted to have me proceed to make some zone changes in the state. And I took that to the flyway. The flyway approved a new waterfowl hunt zone. It's now called the new Northeast Zone, which includes Elko and White Pine counties. That was asked for by those counties in an endeavor to get an earlier hunt so that they could take those opportunities before they have freeze out over there. The other thing that the commission voted on in November is to increase the hunt zone area for swans, and the flyway did not approve that. They brought out the environmental assessment that was done for swans signed back in 2003, and it specifically states that Nevada cannot expand that zone until the trumpeter swan core population reaches 90% of management goals. That goal is right around 590, and the trumpeter core population currently stands at about 370. So there's a few more years before we're going to be able to expand that swan zone. So the swan hunt, the hunt area will be unchanged from past years. Otherwise, other than for each of the species and proposed hunts, you'll see that there's 3 zones instead of 2 zones now. The only other thing that would be different on the new zone for the Northeast Zone, the Elko White Pine Zone, on scaup, it's proposed that the scaup season's shorter than the regular waterfowl season. So in the Northeast Zone, it's proposed that the scaup starts at the beginning of the season, whereas the other 2 zones, the scaup season is at the latter part of the season. And I won't go through all of those recommendations one by one. Any questions on anything that we have proposed?
The gentleman yesterday that was that basically proposed this Northeast Zone, I can't remember his name right now, but I got in my notes that he wanted an October 1 start, and I noticed that the Northeast Zone is starting on September 17th. Is there Was there any reason for him?
That's on the youth hunt, on page 2, the waterfowl, that's the regular waterfowl season. You'll see the northeast zone is recommended October 1st as an opener.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. And just for your information, as we go through this, and you take public comment from the cabs, if there are season date changes, in order to stay within the framework, we'll have to check back and make sure that everything that's proposed fits within the framework before the commission proceeds with the vote on that.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Drew.
Just a couple questions, Russ. I think Elko Cab, and they'll probably speak to this, recommended the 24th of September as an opening date. I'm assuming there's no biological issue with that from your standpoint?
That, at this point in time, everything is all framework, and that fits within the framework. That would be acceptable.
And the other one was just a question. When the Northeast Zone was first developed, I was under the impression that Eureka County was included in that, and I think their cab made mention of that. Is there any commentary on that?
In November, prior to November, but what was brought to the commission last November, there had been 3 proposals that were put together, including various counties, and in November the commission chose the option that was just Elko and White Pine.
Okay, further commission comment, public comment? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Wellington, Elko County, for the record. Gentleman's name was Josh that was here yesterday. And I had him clarify with Commissioner Drew that when he mentioned October 1st, he didn't want it any later than October 1st. So when I spoke to him about the September 24th recommendation from the Elko CAB, he was in support of that. So I just wanted to make that clear. Basically what I would ask for is, starting with the youth hunt in the northeast zone, which would be our zone, we would like their hunt to start, as the biologist said, on September 17th, 2011, and actually end on January 14th of 2012. As for the adult hunts for the ducks, northeastern zone, we would ask that date start on September 24th, and it would end on January 6th, and that would be same with the coots, same with the snipe, the geese, both geese, the snow and the Canadian geese, and falconry. And then what we would ask is that on the scalp, that they would stay with the department's recommendation of October 1st through December 23rd. Did you get that? You want me to go through it one more time? Has everybody got that?
Yeah, you're going to do it again.
Okay. Starting on page 1, which is the special youth hunt for the northeast zone, we would ask that you go with the department's recommendation of September 17th, since we're going to split the 2-day hunt, one at the beginning, one at the end. September 17th for that hunt. The second hunt, instead of being January 21st, it would be January 14th, 2012. And the other hunts for the northeastern zone would be the start date of September 24th, ending January 6th. And the only exception would be the one which is the department's recommendation of October 1st through December 23rd.
Okay, explain that last one.
Okay, that's the scalp. It would be the third one if you're going down on page 2. It's actually the second one down on page 2.
Okay, so
that one would stay at October 1st through December 23rd, as that was they have biological reasons for that, so.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, if you decide to vote to accept these, I would recommend that you do it with a caveat that if it does not fit within the federal framework guidelines, which we need to go back and analyze quite complex, that your default would be something else, either what's proposed or something else.
I thought we checked that yesterday.
Everything that it proposes in the framework.
It is.
Wellington's done this homework. Very good job.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Of course, Mr. Harwell. This is Waterfowl.
Darrell Harwell with Nevada Waterfowl Association. Our board made the recommendation that we just keep what the department has and go with it. And if I switch my hat, Darrell with Washoe County Advisory Board. Our proposal was keep the youth hunts the way they were, but move the dates on the one day ahead and one day later, but that doesn't work with the federal framework. You'd have to move the youth days to, thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Dixon?
Paul Dixon, Clark County. For the record, we did go over these and at our advisory board, and we agreed with everything. I guess I had a question for clarity for me now that I'm looking at things for Ken or Russell, which is the youth season in the southern zone. How does that play out at Moapa Valley?
Sorry, what was your question?
The youth season, we moved front and back, but how does that play out at Moapa Valley, where if you look at this everywhere, Moapa Valley hunting, general hunting starts considerably later because of the reasons, but I don't see a change in the youth hunting there, so they won't have flooded fields on October 1st at Moapa Valley. So we didn't do anything special for the youth hunt at Moapa, and I didn't bring it up in my meeting, because to be honest with you, I'm sitting here right now and realize that I've made a mistake. So I'm kind of asking for clarity for the commission and board of whether we have to do something there, because I'm not sure what's huntable on October 1st at Moapa. Sorry.
That's right. That's actually a very good question. It's never really been addressed before with that different opener at Overton, but probably what would have to happen, and that's the primary hunting spot, but with the youth, they would probably have to be closed within the Moapa Valley in order to address that. And if you move it later to match with Moapa, we can't add a third day, a special day for Moapa, and then it puts the youth day and the rest of that zone within the regular season.
Right.
So,
I mean, I just want to bring that up, it's something that housekeeping or something we need to take care of, but it hasn't been taken care of.
so we either have to, the most logical thing to do is probably to add verbiage on the southern zone youth days that Moapa Valley is closed for the early season youth day.
Because you can't, under federal framework,
You can't be outside, yeah.
you can't be outside that, so. Because right now, I mean, you can tell people to go there, but it's gonna be dirt. There is no water for ducks at that time of the year.
Okay, so just to clarify, do we need to do anything? Is it just a problem, and, or is there anything that can be done?
I believe that we actually need to add to this regulation change that hunting, youth hunting at Moapa Valley in the southern region would be closed, because it would be kind of a cruel joke to have some kid go out there to basically dry ponds. Correct?
Sorry, I've gotten 4 conversations at once going on here. Everybody's asking me questions.
What is the change that we would need to do?
Well,
we'd have to put wording in here, correct?
we have to put wording in here, but Larry Gilbertson just pointed out that for a number of years we've been hauling geese down to Overton from our goose roundup in Reno and taking them down to Overton. Specifically, the idea behind that is to provide a goose opportunity for the youth at Overton. We're either going to have to make the Southern Zone Youth Day be specific, the early one anyway, specific to Overton, and have it within 14 days of the Overton opener, or, I mean, realistically, where else can the youth go outside of Overton in that southern zone? I mean, there's a few ponds here and there, but that's the big hunting area in that southern zone. So that may need to be proposed that the early season youth day be within 14 days of the opener of the hunt at Overton.
Okay, and so that would be the opening of the,
November 5th is the opening.
yeah, is in the opener, so that would mean,
It would have to be either October 29th or October 22nd.
so it could be the 22nd? So why don't we, that way we can give a little break, why don't we, can we do it October 22nd?
That would be within the framework, yes.
So October 22nd on the special youth waterfowl hunt, southern zone. And do we need to do any changes to limit it to the wild portion of the Overton Wildlife Management Area?
You don't need to, but it's sort of pointless anywhere else because
That's where they're gonna go.
The rest of that zone is gonna already be open on that date. So any place else that's not really a youth day, it's just the regular season for the rest of that zone. Because Moapa opens later than the rest of the zone.
But there's not a lot of other opportunities up there.
Correct. It's sort of a default thing there.
And is there a way I can screw up the northeast zone for Wellington before I leave this spot?
Good question.
Next thing you know, they'll want our water.
Okay, any other public comment?
Take care of that. I missed
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Doug Martin. I'm wearing three hats. One, I'm representing the Carson City cab. Second, I'm representing Canvasback. And third, I'm representing myself, a 40-year veteran duck hunter. One point of clarification, we had two guidelines, one with one youth day hunt and one with two. And we acted on the one with just one youth day hunt on October 1st. So Russell, I have a question, if you could come up, which are your recommendations now? Just this October 1st or the October 1st and February 4th?
The paperwork you have that only has one youth day, that was an informal email that I went out to gather information from sportsmen on what they wanted to do. The official one that came out with the support material is the one that has two youth days. That's the one that your cab should have received with their support material.
Thank you. That's going to change some of what I have to say, because what I was going to say is that our cab voted to put the youth hunt at the end of the season for many reasons. One is identification of birds. You all know what eclipse plumage is, and I defy you to take a youth out and point at a pintail and say that that's a male or a female as easily as you could in February. So we were, for many reasons, putting it to the end, but now I see it's at the beginning and the end. And I just talked to our chairman from our board, and that would have changed our discussion and our influence. So I'd like to, just be silent as far as the cab goes. Then as far as Canvasback goes, we recommend having the hunt at the end of the season. If it's 1 or 2 days, putting it at the end. And part of the reason, and one of the primary reasons, and I talked to Gib Mackinnon about this too, he had the same concern, and that is water usage and putting water on our marshes earlier than when the general opener is. So we both, Gib and Canvasback, would like to have the youth hunt at the end, whether it's 1 day or 2 days. So that's just our thought on this whole thing. We are all about youth and youth opportunities, so we definitely support those things. But from Canvasback's perspective, we would like to have the youth hunt at the end of the season. And my own personal observations in February, I've been hunting waterfowl in this area for 41 years now. February is quite spectacular. The weather is good. I looked at last year, and the February 12th was 65 degrees with 30-mile-an-hour winds and a front coming in. And on the end of September last year, it was 95 degrees and filled with mosquitoes. Being a duck hunter, I know which one of those two is a duck tank. So that's our suggestions. And just from me being a 40-year-old, well, 60-year-old hunter, 40-year veteran, thank you, is, you know, I have observed youth hunting for a long time. I have a 31-year-old youth who didn't get to take advantage of these youth days. And would I have taken advantage of them had it been there? Of course I would. And I just want to tell you that I'm totally supportive of all youth hunt opportunities. Next year I'm going to come back and have an idea for you, and that is to take and close our general season around the full moon in December for a 2-day period. And that way we can open on a Saturday and we can close on a Saturday. What you're proposing here does not allow us to close on a Saturday. We close the general hunt on a Friday. And despite the fact that, you know, we're all about youth, it's still us old gray-haired guys that are buying the tags. And I have 41 years of buying state stamps, federal stamps, and state licenses. So I think having weekend hunts is a good thing for those of us who go out there every day of the season that we can. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions from the commission? Looks like none. Okay, thank you. Any further, okay, come on up.
Commissioner Jesse Lappin, Churchill County. Our CAB voted to go with the department's recommendations of a youth day at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. We did have some members of the public show up to our meeting to express that to us. An example would be that there was an individual in Churchill County that takes children hunting that don't normally get to hunt or are not even used to being in the outdoors. So he felt that exposing those kids that are coming from an indoor environment to January in the middle of Greenhead or something like that would discourage them from ever wanting to be a sportsman. So we voted to go with the department's recommendation, and then we also voted to support Chris and his wood project. We didn't have anybody from the public show up to go against it. Go against that. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Russell.
I just want to make one further comment as far as what Elko County had proposed, and it's just the general feeling that having the scaup season close, or excuse me, open a week later than the general duck, they may miss some opportunity there because scaup usually pass through that area much earlier. So if it matched their general season recommendations, they may actually have a better opportunity to harvest scaup through that region.
Okay, does that do anything on the back end, or?
No, because scaup's a shorter season, so we'll have to move it up a week. Or, if they move up, if scaup is moved up to match their recommendation of September 24th, then the close would have to move up 1 week, which would be December 16th.
Ken, do you want to comment on that? Seems like you're missing some opportunities.
For the record, Ken Wellington, Elko County, we would support that as long as the biology. That's the only reason why we didn't comment on that, because it was a shorter season and we weren't sure what the guidelines were with that.
Okay. That was September 24 and December 16th?
Correct.
Okay. Any further Cab or public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring back to commission. Any comments from the commissioners on the as proposed as well as the proposed changes? Mr. Howell, I know you spent a lot of time at Sunnyside. Any issues there?
No. The only question I would have is the gentleman that in the northwest zone that wanted to move up the youth hunt from October 1st to a later date. Do you have a suggestion for a later date, Russell?
I was looking at the last two possible days, which would be the 4th and the 5th.
Okay. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Need to get you on the record. And go ahead and state your name again.
Yeah, Doug Martin with Canvas Back. If we did put the 2 days, we would like to have it the 4th and the 5th, which is the same as in the southern zone.
The 4th and 5th of February?
Yes.
2 days consecutively.
Right.
If you were going to have a 2-day youth hunt, then the 4th and 5th, yes.
Just a follow-up question on that, Doug.
Yes.
Would that sounds like that's a northwest zone.
A northwest zone only,
Okay,
yes.
got it.
Just for a point of clarification, there's one typo on the recommendations under SCOP. Instead of northwest zone, it just says northern zone, and that should be corrected to northwest zone.
Okay, so just for clarification, we've got Jesse from, it's Churchill? And both Churchill and Carson are basically in the same northwest zone, right?
Right.
Okay, so I guess what I'm seeing is two different schools of thought on this youth hunt dates.
Doug Martin for the record, with the Carson Cab. I have too many hats. From the Carson City Cab's perspective, having the youth hunt on the beginning and the end is not an issue. We didn't have that information when we acted on it. We only had the earlier email, so when we saw it at the beginning, we were recommending moving it to the end. Talking with my chairman, most likely our cab would have supported the early and the end. I'm just speaking from the perspective of Canvas Back. We'd rather have it just at the end. So I am conflicted.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the clarification. I just want to make, I'm trying to do as much to clarify this for the commission, so when they do their motion, that they understand that there were two schools of thought on this, and that's all I'm trying to do.
There are, and Canvas Back really doesn't want to be seen as an obstruction here. So I'm going to tell you that, you know, if we went back and polled our members, they would tell me probably don't obstruct anything.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead, Gil, come on up.
For the record, Gil Yannick, Chairman Carson Advisory Board. Doug is absolutely correct. We had 2 sets of data. Now we see there was a 3rd set of data. And because the first set only had 1 day in the northwest zone. And we said if we're only going to have 1 day, we want to have the 1 day at the end because mostly of the identification problem and the really warm weather that we experienced in October. I think, you know, Doug was communicating with us telephonically. He was in Ely and we were in Carson City. After Doug left the phone, we continued to discuss the issue to arrive at the suggested date for the end of the season. We, in error, selected a date that was beyond the range of the season by a week. And the question became, if we only had 1 day, because we didn't know why, everybody else had 2, we had 1, but we said, that's the department said, we only get 1, we get 1. I think if there was an option 2, having the 2 days at the end of the season was preferable because of the ability for identification, the availability of the right kind of weather. Churchill's issue about weather and trying to bring a new youth out in the middle of the winter maybe turn them off a little bit. So they have a good point. And I think our board would acquiesce to try to get more people out than anything else. And that was the whole issue. So if there's a group that feels that even though it's difficult to identify the various species in October, we like to err in the fact that we get them out. Because if they feel they won't get them out in October, February, then we'll accept one in October, one in February. If we have our real brothers, we bring them both the 4th and the 5th out.
Okay, thanks, Gil. Okay. I think that's it for public comment. Bring it back, and if there's any further comment from the commission, anybody?
Ready to take a stab at it?
Do you have your notes? Do you have good notes on this? It's going to take some good notes. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Howell.
I'll move to approve CR 11-11, seasons bag limits, special regulations for migratory waterfowl, with the following changes. The northeast zone, the special youth hunt, would be September 17th, January 24th.
14.
September 14th?
January 14.
January 4th?
14. 1-4.
Okay, September 17th, January 14th. The northwest zone, February 4th and 5th. The southern zone, October 22nd and February 4th. And the other one I had was the northeast zone wanted to change their open seasons for ducks and mergansers from September 24th to January 6th. And everything else would be as the department recommended. How'd I do?
I think you missed a little bit.
I missed a little bit?
Scout.
I said that. I missed a bunch.
Do we have a second on that? Is it gonna die as no second? Oh, you're gonna second? Okay. Any other motions, either amendments or anything else? I've taken pretty good notes on this, and I asked all the questions, so why don't I go ahead and take a stab at amending the motion. With regard to the special youth waterfowl hunt, northwest zone, based on the concessions of the Carson Cab and Cabsback, it would be, I believe that we would keep the October 1, 2011 and February 4th, 2012 on the youth, so leave that as is. Is that correct? Okay. And then I think ducks and mergansers was correctly stated by Commissioner Howell with Scott, that the northeast zone start date would be September 24th, and the end date would be December 16th. Do we have a correction? Is the northwest zone instead of northern zones? We have a typo, just a wordsmithing there. With regard to coots and common moorhens, the dates would be September 24th, and this is northeast zone, September 24th to January 6th. common snipe, January 24th to September 24th to January 6th. I believe all the geese are fine. I don't have any changes on the geese.
It would do the same dates, 24th.
Oh, it is the 24th on the geese as well? Okay. September 24th to January 6th. For northeast zone, and that would be Canada and white-fronted geese, snow and Ross geese, September 24th, January 6th, northeast zone, and falconry. Should we do falconry alone? Okay, September 24th to January 6th. Any falconers here?
Second. No.
You need to include.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand why we needed to keep that same. Okay, so I amended the motion. We have a second on the amended motion. I think we already, Commissioner Waltz had already seconded. Okay, Russell, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that in the motion it includes the swan season dates as proposed.
And, swan season as proposed. Okay, so we have any discussion on the amendment? Okay, so I guess what we'll be doing is we'll be voting on the amendment, and once we have that vote, then we'll vote on the main motion. Okay, so all in favor of the amendment, as I have stated, all in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? No opposition? So that passes, the amendment passes 8-0, which will mean that the next motion will be fairly easy. So let's go ahead and vote on the main motion, which is now as amended, and all in favor state aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that's unanimous, 8-0. Okay. Thank you.